Hello, welcome to my channel today. So today we'll be talking about the introduction to Polish literature. I thought this was very important today because I am going to be talking more about Polish literature in itself. So I will be covering some books, and I feel like the background is very important for this. So this is probably going to run in like 3 parts maybe, and I'm going to do like a very thorough coverage of the events in Polish literature, starting from basically Slavs pre-Christianity up until sometime past World War II. So today we're going to focus on the very beginnings, which should be quite interesting. Also, I forgot to mention last time, please subscribe to the channel. I'm still working on my video skills and everything else, but I am getting better. And you will not regret in the future, because I do intend to have merch as well. So if you're interested in merch, I would suggest you to subscribe to my Subscribestar as well, because there are some very good offers for you. So for example, if you sign up for like £5, you get 5% off on all merch. And this is definitely going to happen because I'm going to create some sexy merch for you. So yeah, just a little bit of advertising, sorry. Also, please like it. And whoever dislikes my videos, I really want to meet you. I want to know why. It's literally always one person. I need to know. Anyway, other housekeeping issues. So very recently I did a poll on Twitter asking people whether they're cool with my accent or not. A majority of people weirdly said that they don't mind, but then there were like 20% who said that that it bothers them. So to you, I am so sorry. I apologize. I am working on my accent. I promise. But yeah, so that's it with the housekeeping. Just like and subscribe. That's all. About the Polish literature, I hope you'll find it interesting. It's cool to know the Polish lore, because most people don't really know that much about the Polish literature. Like, I do intend to do some translations in the future of some of the works that have never been translated, because I do actually believe that it's worth it. And I just think that you should all know what's, it's just interesting lore, and not many people actually talk about it. So yeah, let's start. So the thing is, so obviously pre-Christianity you had a lot of Slavic people in the territory, and the problem is that when the Christianity took place or happened, a lot of Slavic oral tradition just disappeared. So it's not really well written down. It's nowhere. But there are some remnants. They did actually stay in for example, some of the medieval writers did cover some of the oral stories, so we do get some understanding on what was happening in the country back in the day. Czech, Lech, and Rus. So this is one of the biggest legends, because that basically covers the creation of Poland and also the creation of Russia and Czech Republic, I guess. So basically there were 3 brothers. They were all looking for different prey, and they all spread into 3 different parts of the country. So I'm assuming these would be European plains. So Lech was the one who was supposed to discover Poland, right? So he finds himself face to face with this fierce white eagle. The eagle's guarding its nest from intruders. And then obviously the eagle is there on the background of the red of the setting sun and stuff, beautiful stuff. And Lech decided that this is a good omen and he's going to settle there. So this is the settlement itself was in Gniezno, which is in Poland. The etymology of the word is basically Gniezno from gniazdo, which in Polish means nest, a nest basically. So again, he chooses that as his main settlement, and he adopts the white eagle as his as the main coat of arms. And this is why you get the eagle on the red background, so because of the sunset, and the white stripe, I guess just for a laugh. What's really interesting though, right? Because it is just a myth, right? The thing is, in 13th century chronicles, you do actually have, you do get a mention of Jack, Leg, and Russ, who are sons of Pan, so a Pannonian prince. That was a province in Roman Empire, so who knows, maybe they did exist, maybe they did split in a few different directions to find their settlements. Who knows? Anyway, but this is how we get to the medieval era. That was a fairly interesting period in Polish literature. So you had people like Gallum Anonymous and also Jan Długosz. They were mainly like scribes or bishops and stuff. So they were the ones responsible for a lot of chronicles. Gotta admit, the Polish literature from that period of time is quite dry because it's just heavily Christian. It's either very religious or it's just chronicles. So you don't really get that much fiction at the time yet. So I think it's very important to mention you get something called Bogorojita. That's one of the most important Polish texts from that specific time period, so between 13th and 14th century. It's highly patriotic and also highly religious. It's sung in churches, and it was also used at the battlefield at the time. So it's kind of like a confession of faith. It's a prayer to both Mary and Jesus. At some point it became a song of knighthood, and it wasn't only used during the battles, it was also used at the coronations. So I think that's quite interesting. So obviously I did go to school in Poland. You are forced to memorize the whole thing, and you have to recite the whole thing, as well as you can. So yeah, everyone's at school is absolutely tortured with that, but because it's a very important text, you are made to memorize it. And I think it's very important, I still remember bits of it. So it's a good thing. So then we've got 15th century. That's when basically the intellectual thought starts to develop, and also the Polish Renaissance. Polish Renaissance happened a little bit later, just because of, a lot of turbulence surrounding the history and such. So we've got the, Gutenberg's printing press. That made everything easier as well. And then we get Mikoy Ray. He was basically a father of Polish literature, often compared to Dante. So a little bit about Ray, right? Right. Another thing about Polish writers, a lot of them were heavily invested either in the religious side of things or into the political side of things, sometimes both. So most of them came from nobility, they were rich, they had a lot of land and stuff, they were generally, wealthy. So I guess it kind of made it much easier for them to, create, because they had that freedom. So yeah, a similar story with Ray. He was born into Polish nobility. However, he didn't finish his education. He just, he was just drifting, kinda. He had, if I remember well, he had a fairly turbulent childhood with the moving around a lot, so he couldn't really finish his education properly as well as he wanted to. So yeah, he was passionate about the language as well, so he did study orthography and writing, spelling a lot. But you can apparently you can still see within his writing a lot of like plebeian wording. Some said that it was on purpose. Some said that his language actually wasn't that good. So it really depends. It's a very weird style in general. Religion-wise, he was a Calvinist, and he very often fought with the Catholic Church. So Ray is most known for his book called Zwierzyniec, which basically means the bestiary. It's his most known work. There's some illustrations as well. There's also this very famous quote that's often used by Polish people, especially it's quite funny because the quote is very commonly known, except people who've never picked up a book in their life often quote it without having any understanding of where it's from. So yeah. So So basically the quote reads as like, so let the foreign nations know that Polish people aren't geese, they have their own language. I'm terrible at translating things, by the way, so let's just say I'm paraphrasing. So what he's trying to say is that Latin kind of sounds like geese because of the way it sounds, and also due to the fact that when you would be writing Latin, you'll be also using the goose feathers. So basically, he's trying to say that Poland has its own language and its own culture, which is completely independent from everyone else, and especially the Papist Rome. As I said previously, Ray was a Calvinist, so he wasn't really the biggest fan of the Pope. So you can see that, in all of those bits he mentions quite often. So another thing about him and his works is that in most of his works, basically, he tries to say that the perfect man needs to have virtue and ethics, but also he needs religion. So he tries to make people to focus on both, which I guess is quite interesting. Now, right, moving on. We've got another very important poet from a very similar period. It's Jan Kochanowski. Right, so this man basically gives nightmares to every school kid, because you have to... Right, imagine you're 15 and you have to go through like a bunch of poems about like his dead daughter. It's just a bit... It's not only a bit morbid, but it's also a bit... just... too much, I guess. But he is nonetheless... He did create a lot of important works. So... Another thing about him is that he translated Virgil into Polish language, so he's also famous for that. And generally, he's a very important person. He was very active in politics as well, and he had a lot of land. There was a lot about his past. I'm not going to go into that because it's very relevant to what I'm talking about in here. So, anyway, so his works were very Neoplatonian, Neo-Aristotelian. Now to the poems about his daughter. They were called laments, either. So it's 19 poems that were all devoted to that child, Ursula, who died at 2.5. They're very reflective, but also sentimental, and they're kind of written like a eulogy. There's some, at the end, there's this, he sees her mother from heaven telling him that, it's all going to be okay and stuff. It's a lot. I think it's very important to, if you're interested in Polish literature, I think he's one of those people that you definitely should look into, because it's very important. So yeah. But other than the grim stuff, he also did fraszki. I couldn't find a translation of that. I think it's more or less more of a Polish thing, potentially. But they're like satirical short poems. They're often humorous. And there a lot of people in Poland used to write them. They did try to be they did a lot of satirical content, so that's one thing. So that's about it. 15th century. And 16th, I guess, as well, a little bit. Now we've got the Baroque literature. So we've got 17th century in the beginning of the 18th century. So that period of time is split into 3 sections. So we've got the first one, that's known for religiosity, mysticism, and the general existential dread. Then there's the second phase. So people wanted to... So they were split into 3 movements, I guess. So you've had people who really wanted to focus on just growing Polish literature. So, as I said with Ray, he wanted Polish people have their own language. So then we've got the second phase as well. So we've had people who, just like Ray, really wanted to focus on growing Polish literature and the culture, and they were very distrustful of the foreign influences. They just didn't like them. But then you also had another lot. They were mainly I guess you could translate it into court writings, or people at the court would be writing them. So the wealthier people, basically. So they were so they were more open to those foreign influences. They wanted, they really wanted to, take ideas from other people and, maybe translate works and such. So that was another thing. Then you've got the whole separate bit. This was the type of writing done by like the plebs and nomads. They were really weird people who weren't really part of any groups. It's very hard to find a translation for this, but I guess it was kind of called market poetry, because they were often found at like the local like farmers markets, and they would, I don't know, they would just shout their plebeian stuff at people, I guess. So yeah, that was another movement of sorts. And then you've got Marston. If you've seen my video on Madame Bovary, you will remember that Flaubert was known for making sure that everything was perfect, and he was doing the literary realism. Marston was kind of similar, but he was a poet, and he wanted to make sure that everything was perfect as well. So we've got a very similar behavior here. He was very thorough when it came to his own poetry. So then we've got the third phase as well. That was the end of Baroque. So this is where we get the history coming in as well, because the Polish military was weakening at the time, and the neighboring nations wanted to get a piece of that pie as well. There's Poland, it's available, the military is going to absolute, and it's just not good, So we get the Enlightenment. In most countries during the Enlightenment, it's literally the Enlightenment. The culture and the writing and everything, just improves and everything's amazing. Not in Poland, because let's focus on Polish history during the Enlightenment time, okay? Because it just so hilarious to me. So it gets very shaky at the time, because they've decided that every parliamentary representative is equal. Therefore, they decided to introduce something that was called liberum veto. Now, basically that meant that any parliamentary representative had the right to either cancel the current session of the parliament or literally nullify any legislation that has already been passed. Now, this is literally just a disaster waiting to happen, because foreign officials started bribing Polish parliamentary representatives to nullify the stuff that they didn't want to go through, because that would ruin their cause. So it was just madness. Literally, like 1/3 of the legislation didn't come through. It was terrible. Like the whole parliament was absolutely paralyzed. The Poland almost sunk into the state of anarchy, and it was basically ruled by magnates. It was terrible. Like nothing was could have been done, because everything had to be passed anonymously. I literally practiced this earlier. Anonymously. So yeah, it was just terrible. So that literally contributed to the destruction of the Polish/Lithuanian Commonwealth, and literally ruined Poland. Stupid. So stupid. So yeah. So considering those issues, the Enlightenment was developing much slower than in other countries, as you would imagine, because history is quite important here. The politics and who rules your country can really have an influence on what's actually happening, especially on culture. So it's just bad. But one good thing, right? 1740, someone called Stanisław Kochanowski, he opened an elite school for nobility, noble youth, I guess. And that really started the intellectual development. So it started really improving. And then you got this fantastic king, right? Reading about him kind of makes me pro-monarchy, not gonna lie, because he just sounds amazing. So his name was Stanisław August Ponitovsky. He loved surrounding himself with all the cream of society, all the artsy people, all of the poets, writers, everything like that. And he did a lot to, to improve the cultural heritage in Poland. He honestly did a lot. So he also did those Thursday dinners where he would invite a lot of people to kind of hang out with him. So it's always a massive honor to meet the king. So a lot of people got a chance, and they if they had king's ear, they could actually get a lot of things done. So it was really good. So that period of time, it was amazing for culture, right? So we've had the magazine called Monitor that was publishing essays and articles that were calling for kind of like a reform of the country, a desperately needed reform. And then you also had the night school. That was basically some kind of a military school, but they really wanted to teach you like a broad knowledge as well. So it was really lovely because you would go to the school, but you wouldn't only be there to learn, some gruesome fighting. You would also be there to enhance your intellectual abilities. So great. I'd say we need that, honestly. So yeah, it was really good. So then we've got Ignacio Krishitsky. The guy wrote a lot of fairy tales. He got a lot of medals as well because Ponitovsky was a massive fan of him. So he was known for. He was also part of the Polish clergy, actually. So he, again, as I said previously, religious, but also an artist. There's a lot of that in Polish culture. So Krashitsky is very known for Macheda, which is this really odd poem. It's about a war between like cats and a rat mouse military, and you've got people as well, and like King Popiel. He's from a Polish legend of sorts, and the people side with the cats, and then you've got Gryzomir, who's like the main guy leading the mouse/rat army. What he wanted to do, right? He was mocking Baroque and their literature and stuff, as well as historical works and making of them. Yes. So he also hated sentimentalism, so he was trying to, satirize it as much as he could. So, oh yeah, he also hated conservative nobility. He was more pro-king, which is quite interesting when you think about it, because you've got nobility, they're conservative, but the king is actually, cool and very pro-culture, I guess. I find it very different to like what you see in a lot of other things. And then that's the thing. So Poland falls 1772 and 1795. There's the fall of Poland. It's being taken over by Germany, by Austria. Sorry. It's being taken by Prussia, Austria, and Russia. Everything's ruined. Poland's gone off the map. It doesn't exist. Polish culture ruined. So the cultural hub that existed is now completely gone. Most Polish people emigrate, Polish artists, I guess, they emigrate to other countries, for example Paris or other places, and they write from there. And they were, it's very important, they establish like their emigration hub from which they write about Poland. That's about it for the first part. Early Polish literature is very patriotic, and it's very focused on, as I said at the start, either religion or the country itself. But it is very interesting nonetheless, because it's important to know those initial parts that happen to the country, and the history is very important and relevant as well when we think about the literature. So, for example, the way you learn literature at school in Poland, in an ideal setting, you would have like one class of literature a week, and then one class of history a week, and then they would run alongside. So you'd cover, for example, Romanticism in literature, and then you would cover the same time period and history, so you get this very nice understanding of exactly what happens in the in everything. So you can use your historical knowledge to and apply it to the literature to understand it and why certain things were written a very specific way. You get it with other things as well, so there's a history. I'm pretty sure we did that with art as well. And then you've got this like really nice all-encompassing understanding of humanities in Poland and why they happened the way they did. So everything references everything. So that's it for this part. I hope you've enjoyed that. Next time I'll be talking about a lot of really cool stuff. We're going to cover Romanticism, which was probably the best period in Polish literature, because that's when the Polish intelligentsia rises up to fight for the independence. So it gets very fascinating when we get to the next part, which is mainly Romanticism. So we see the way Romantics stood up for the country, for independence, for nationalism. Some of them were radical, and they wanted to get back what they wanted to. They wanted to get back what they deserved, which was their own country, which was lost and gone. And we will see a lot of very interesting content in relation to that. They produced emotions similar to when you read Goethe or Byron, and it's just beautiful. We're going to hear a bit about the Forefathers Eve, which if you play The Witcher you may have heard of before. We're also going to cover Mickiewicz, who was the main key person in the whole story of Romanticism in Poland. And we're going to go further to positivists who were opposing Romantics, and then we've got another lot afterwards who go back to the Romantics. It's very interesting, and this video right now is just a setup for what's going to happen next week, because it's going to be very fascinating. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. This was very short, but I want to split it in a few parts so you don't get too overwhelmed. So yeah, please like the video and please subscribe to it. And you could donate on Subscribestar, so I don't have to, so I could focus on this full time instead of, working for a faceless company. Yeah, please share the video. Please, let your mom, dad, and dog know about it, because I am trying to treat this very seriously, so it's going to get better for sure. And yeah, just a few things. If you'd like to read some Polish literature and you wonder where to start, I can throw some names at you. If you're a fan of fantasy, Sapkowski and The Witcher, read that. If you're a fan of science fiction, Stanisław Lem. If you're a fan of classics and you like grim things just like I do, read some of the short novellas. I'll be talking about them next week as well. Read The Doll, which is Boleslav Prus. It's going to keep you entertained for quite a while because it's quite long, but it is very good, and it shows you quite well the situation of Poland in the 19th century. So I'm going to leave you with that. Enjoy the rest of your week, and yes, please do subscribe. Okay, goodbye.